that the people at the Constitutional Convention have to be human, virtuous people. Or else their Constitution is not going to acknowledge all the virtues. This is in some ways a conservative point. The people involved have to have had childhoods and mothers and be raised and somehow get to the Constitutional Convention where they're going to make this wonderful society in a mood to make it. To make the same point about Immanuel Kant, in his short book on ethics, he denies that we need anthropology. We don't need to talk about how people actually are. We're going to talk, says Kant, about perfectly rational entities. They could be six-headed beings from interstellar space, but if they're rational, then they will follow, say, the categorical imperative in one of its three formulations. To which I say, geez, Emmanuel, wake up. In order for people to want to follow the categorical imperative, they have to grow up as French people or Bangladeshi people who have these virtues in some idiosyncratic, culturally specific combination. It's crazy to talk about this ideal, prudence only, or in Kant's case, justice only, personality as solving all problems by producing a constitution of liberty. It can't be done without a rich context. This would be a Burkean point. Burke, the great conservative philosopher, sort of not much of a philosopher, but the great conservative Edmund Burke, late 18th century figure, would have pointed out, and did point out to people like Bentham, look, come on guys, or to the French revolutionaries who wanted to make the world anew, arbitrarily. Just, okay, let's slap together the new human being and we'll all be happy together. He said, look, there's a reason that people are English or French. They have a history. They grow up together. As I said, they have families and mothers. And so you've got to acknowledge that in your political philosophy. I have a piece in the National Review, which is not my favorite magazine. I'm not a conservative, I'm a libertarian. Just recently, which talks about this if you want to learn more about it. So anyway, that's my case. That to do the virtues, you've got to do, here, let me pass this around. To do the virtues, you've got to do the virtues. You can't just derive them from somewhere. That's my case. That's my argument. I'll give you the same advice I gave the other class. In any class or presentation, don't just write down what the professor says. I used to do that all the time. It's terrible. The professor would come in and say hello. Start thinking right from the beginning. I ought to have said this before. Start thinking right from the beginning what you're going to say, what you're going to ask, or assert, how you're going to contradict the person, what's wrong with the argument, what's right about it. So you're always thinking about it. That's much better. There's a classic Harvard story that I've got to tell in this connection. Radcliffe, which was the women's college, was once quite separate from Harvard. It had its own dorms, of course, back in the old days in the 50s. And the Harvard professors, the male Harvard professors, most of them were male, would come over to the Radcliffe yard and teach classes of women only. This would be circa 1950. In the 50s, that system was abolished. On the way to abolishing Radcliffe College, which was a stupid thing to do, was in the Radcliffe yard in the day it was announced, and there wasn't a dry eye in the place. But anyway, so the Radcliffe women started to come over to the Harvard classes. So there are men and women in the class. And this, you have to understand, this is the height of Freudianism. So everything's about sex. It's 1955 or so. Sex, 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 sex. Don't you know? You're driven by sex, 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 sex. That's what everyone said in 1955. They finally got over it, but they talked a lot about it. So, there's a professor of government. I think his name was Charrington. And he didn't like this. He didn't like having women in his classes. And there was this one young woman from Radcliffe, sat in the front row and would knit a sweater. Well, this is actually a very good way to listen to a lecture, because you're thinking, got something to do with you, don't take notes, knit. Well, this guy, crazy, went on for about 3 classes. Finally, he stopped in the middle, said, young woman, do you know that knitting is a form of masturbation? And without missing a stitch, she said, you do it your way, Professor, I'll do it mine. And that was the best answer I've ever heard. Anyway, think when you're listening. Now, let's hear the fruit of your thinking. Do it your way, Professor, I'll do it mine. Yeah.
Just one thing that came across while you were talking was a lot of the idea of virtue being applied to society will make a good society. Like if you apply virtue, a good society will come out of it.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of it has to do with culture, though.
Yeah, it does.
For example, like ISIS, they have a different idea of justice than
That's
we
right.
do. We may say we have justice, we have a just society.
Yeah.
They're going to say the same thing, and they think they have all the virtues. But
Yeah.
culturally, it's completely different.
I understand that. And then that's the debate. Then you need to debate whether chopping the heads off your enemies is virtuous or not. I just heard, and I haven't quite gotten this clear in my mind the other day, an extremely good answer to this. In the early 19th century, the British wanted to stop the custom of sati, which was, among Hindus, burning to death the widow of the man who had just died, throwing her on the funeral pyre, right? That was the custom. And the Indians who wanted to go on, at least the Indian men, I must say, who wanted to go on with this custom, said to the English administrator, but it's our custom. Virtues are relative. It's our custom. And the administrator said, I understand that perfectly. You're perfectly right. Go on with your custom. But we have a custom too. Our custom is when someone murders someone else, we hang them. So feel free to go on with your custom of sati, but understand that everyone involved in it, everyone who participates, will be tried in an English court and hung. Hanged is the correct way of saying it. So that's a kind of an extreme form of the debate. But the debate is on, and at least it's about virtues. There's no, this is what I'm claiming. There's no position, especially a position of maximizing utility, from which you can leverage all the virtues without talking about them. There's no view from nowhere. It is cultural. Kant was mistaken to eliminate anthropology from his talk about ethics. These are humans we're trying to talk about, not six-headed beasts from interstellar space. I mean, it's not snappy. I can't give you the categorical imperative. I can't give you Jeremy Bentham's, whatever, the maximum, the greatest happiness for the greatest number, which, by the way, is mathematically impossible. But, did you have something?
I just had another question about how you said you have to put the rabbits in the hat initially.
Yeah.
If you take the Christian God out of the picture, where do you get them initially?
Well,
They have to-
yeah, I told you, or maybe I didn't tell you, I'm a Christian. I'm a progressive Episcopalian, if you think of that as Christian. And what you're looking for is foundations. That's what both of these questions have been about. Where's the foundation? And I'm very willing to go to Christian tradition, which is what this is. This, by the way, is St. Thomas Aquinas. This system, oh, by the way, I didn't quite finish it, but it's in the paper, you'll see it. There's a left side and a right side. The left side is more masculine, the right side is more feminine, at least conventionally. The thousands of other virtues you can think of are combinations of these elements. These are like the primary colors. You can get purple from blue and red, but you can't get red from purple. You can do it without the Christian God. You can just say, you can say, as I said, remember I said, this is a pretty good philosophical psychology. It pretty much corresponds to what a flourishing life is. Then we're back to Aristotle. The flourishing human life. You don't have to have God, but St. Thomas had it. Yeah. And this is that's the trouble. In my book, I talk a lot about Christianity, but I don't try, I'm postmodern. I don't believe in foundations. I don't think, I have a foundation in my own life, but other people can have other foundations and it doesn't particularly bother me. I'm a liberal. I believe that you can have the foundation of, Islam, and you can have the foundation of Hinduism, and you can have the foundation of genial atheism, and you can have the foundation, and as long as we have some way of getting along with each other without killing each other, and as long as we, then the question of sati comes up. Why is it that the English have a custom of hanging the people who do it? Yeah, go ahead.
This one, I guess, is more about application.
Just ask it, don't tell me what it's about.
Okay, I was wondering, in regards to a more practical level, do the different types of virtues need to be applied differently then, or should they be applied in the same manner from the start?
Well, they shouldn't be applied in the same manner. You can't apply love in the same manner as prudence, although some utilitarians talk this way. Look, one of the advantages is virtue ethics, which is the point I'm making. And this is somewhat paradoxical because Martha herself is a virtue ethicist. And she was, so she believes, and she's a classical scholar, she believes in this stuff. But I'm criticizing her for falling away from the virtue ethical true faith, which is that there are lots of virtues, and the advantage of these seven, or some others, you might want to put honesty, that's an important virtue to moderns, or you might want to put piety, which was a tremendously important virtue in the Middle Ages, or in up to modern times in many circles. You might want to do other combinations, but in any case, they all have libraries behind them. They have centuries of thinking behind them. They are the great book questions. And that's what a liberal education, such as you're getting, is all about, is how to talk about these things. Whereas there's a certain, I'm an economist, I said, there's a certain snappiness about utilitarianism. Oh, don't worry, calculate cost and benefit, whoop, end of story. Doesn't apply to a mother's love of her child, for example. it has bugger all to do with it.
You said that you don't believe in foundations, but you do
No,
accept
or at least it's not so much that I don't believe I have a foundation, but I don't get angry if you have another. I don't want to kill you.
Okay.
I get this from, I get the formulation of this from Isaiah Berlin, the great English political thinker, intellectual historian. That alternative, what we mean by liberalism. I am a liberal. That is not popular in all circles. My friends on the postmodern left say, oh, the aporia of the Enlightenment project, and even Hayek talked this way, talked about the Enlightenment as this problem that it's both about freedom and about reason. And the two contradict each other. You have a free society of markets on the one hand and central planning on the other, coming out of the same intellectual turmoil of France and Scotland in the 18th century. So I'm just, foundationalism tends to be snappy. I mean, I have a friend, or not a friend really, but an acquaintance who's a libertarian philosopher. In fact, I have a friend, or an acquaintance, a correspondent, not a friend at all, who's a conservative philosopher. Another is a libertarian philosopher. They're both philosophers. And they're both into natural rights. Now, this goes back to Aquinas. And they believe that homosexuality is unethical. Now, I think that's wrong. I think that's incorrect. I'm not myself. In a way, I'm kind of, you wouldn't think I'm normal, but I am. I'm very normal. I was married for 30 years. I have 2 children. Hey, it's not about gayness. And I stopped believing those guys when they came to that conclusion about homosexuality. They're both very smart. One of them was a professor of political science at Austin at the University of Texas. But I forget how you pronounce his name, Buczynski or something. Because it's not that I hate them and want to put them in jail, I just don't think that makes any sense. If they can come to that conclusion, there must be something wrong with natural rights theorizing. If you really come to that conclusion for natural rights. Have you spoken before?
No.
Okay, speak.
Except for to tell you look younger than you said.
Oh, good, please. Say it again.
So what's the difference between having a foundation and having an identity? You're talking about faith and
Oh, that's good. Yeah, that's right.
what's the difference there?
Well, I suppose what we mean by foundations is theorized identity. Wouldn't that be right? Theorized identity. So instead of just having an identity, make a list of all the things you are, that's good, okay. But then you say, well, you see, this is coherent because it's coherence talk. So, this is coherent because it's the Bible. Or this is coherent because it's Christianity. Or this is coherent because it's atheistic humanism. So I suppose that's the answer, isn't it? That makes sense? I suppose what I'm warning against is what lots of people warn against, which is excessive academic talk, where you're theorizing everything so much that you get lost from your common sense and your identity. You start wandering off and start attacking people because they don't agree with you. And that, I think, is the big danger in a liberal society. And liberal societies, as Isaiah Berlin pointed out, don't have many defenses. If you're in a thoroughgoing communist society, they got one answer for everything. And it's enforced by law. And if you don't like it, you get jailed or shot. So that's quite simple. That's very simple. But in a liberal society, if someone starts preaching communism or fascism, as Donald Trump does, Donald Trump's a fascist, he's not he's the actual fascist. And, if they start preaching fascism, we have no way of stopping Donald Trump. This horrible thing that the Turkish government has just done, seizing a newspaper that it doesn't like. That's the kind of thing I want to like. That's illiberal. Yeah.
So if we, like, nowadays, like, we talk about how we all have, like, different foundations,
Yep.
and we don't care if other people believe what they believe. So in order to have a society like that, where we, like, don't kill each other and then we can get along,
Mhm.
doesn't that go back to prudence? Like, it's prudent to not kill you for not believing. So doesn't it, if you have that, if your virtues don't all line up with everybody else's, don't you kind of have to, and you talked about that with, like, the Greek polis, they're like, okay, we don't need, like, faith, hope, and love, because we just need
That's
to
not
not get
bad.
along without killing each other.
That's right, that you can do it that way, and that's an excellent idea. But of course, you could also do it with love. You could also do it with justice.
Right, but if you don't have the same, like, idea of what justice is exactly,
Yeah, but you could have a meta idea about justice, that what's just is allowing people to have different foundations up to my nose, in the usual libertarian way of putting it. Your freedom stops at my nose. And that's just a fundamental liberal idea. Alas, we've gotten governments that are so powerful that they can interfere with people about drinking alcohol in private harmlessly or smoking marijuana. So I think you're right. One sort of defense of such a liberal position, well, in fact, come to think of it, you're absolutely right, because I make this argument in these 3 books, essentially. Because I say, what I finally figured out, it took me 3 books, 3 very long books, oh my God, it's okay. 3 long books to figure it out. What I think I believe now is that what caused our riches, and that's prudence, was liberalism. In the correct definition, not the silly American definition where it's the same thing as socialism, but liberalism. The spread of this idea, the subtitle of the last of the 3 is how ideas, not capital or institutions, enrich the world. And the ideas are the steam engine and the screw propeller, and airplane and the modern university and the stock market and all that. Those are all ideas. But then behind those ideas, supporting those ideas, was the radical idea of, as Adam Smith said, Adam Smith said, the liberal program of equality and justice. That's what Adam Smith called it. The liberal plan, he called it, not program. The liberal plan, I turned it around, the liberal plan of justice and equality. And that's about right. I call it, especially in the 3rd book, which is out in May, put your orders in early, I say that it's legal liberty, equality before the law, and social dignity, which then supports the equality before the law. And that gave ordinary people, now of course in the United States a lot of them were slaves, so wait a second, this isn't a perfectly liberal society, but okay, gave ordinary people the courage, the justice, the prudence to have a go. So what you see is an explosion of innovation after 1800 in these free societies. The freer the society, the closer it comes to this. And it's an ongoing project. It's a slow accumulation of freedoms. Women are mostly free in the United States by comparison with my mother's girlhood. and it's improving, and blacks and Hispanics, it's getting better. And gays, it's getting much better. And now there's a transgender, let's be free about that with Caitlyn Jenner. Go ahead.
So I just want to clarify that, would you say part of liberalism is allowing other people to have their own foundations up
Yeah.
to your nose, like you said?
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you.
That's right. They're, and it's, as I said, it's loose. And we humans want foundations. We want things to be strict so that we know what to do. The catechism, the Baltimore Catechism, and the nuns to enforce it. But that's not my liberal society. And I hope it's not yours. Because the trouble is that if you do this, then you start being nasty to people, and people can't flourish in such a, human beings can't flourish, actually on neither side. Racism is a persistent problem in the United States. And racism is not even good for the racist. It makes him an unhappy, angry person. And you only need to look at the current campaign on the Republican side to see that. Makes him a hateful. Being hateful is bad for your soul. So, let's move forward on all these matters without infringing on noses.
I want to press you a little bit, and this may be a distortion of your position, but
No,
are you
sure
saying?
it's not. I'm sure if you found some terrible error.
I doubt that. I doubt that.
No,
But are you saying that we
I get errors all the time. We do errors all the time.
would you go so far as to say we shouldn't make arguments trying to pull justice out of prudence? And the reason I ask that is, it at least lets us come together in a meeting place with all these diverse
Yeah, that's right.
foundations coming together. And even the example of
Yeah,
the freedom between the fists.
yeah.
It's not so obvious when we try to apply that principle. Well, should competing with one's established business be viewed as a harm or
Yeah.
not? It seems like they are making an appeal to some kind of veil of ignorance could help people with widely divergent interpretations come together.
That's how Martha answered me. And it's how Jim answered me too. I gave this argument to Jim, the first, and I'm afraid the last, James Buchanan Memorial lecture at George Mason again, and I wish they'd keep it up because he ought to be. But I told Jim this, and I think they both think, and so did Rawls, and so did many other, so I think did John Stuart Mill. They think that at least we can agree on this. We might not agree on what constitutes hope or faith, but we can agree on this. And I'm just not sure that's factually true. It may be, and it's very much worth considering if there are minimal liberal formulations that we can give. And that's what Martha said to me. And I said, well, Martha, yeah, okay, but you're a classical scholar, you know that this, well, I didn't go into a big argument with her, I just wrote the paper. But it's a little bit like the argument economists make, and I think you would agree, that we can make the argument on, we can explain behavior in prudence only. So why bother with the other? Well, you bother with the other when there are big anomalies that you can't explain otherwise. And I think there are. One of them in the case of economics is voting, which is irrational. Going to the polls is irrational. Although I tend to go to the polls and vote against Donald Trump. Sorry to campaign against Donald Trump.